Hi there. This is Trent Folks, the editor for the Social Power Lab podcast. Before today's episode begins, I just wanted to make a quick announcement that we are now on Apple Podcast and Substack. More information at the end of the episode. Hello, and welcome to the Social Power Lab podcast, brought to you by Folks Leadership Group.
Hello, hello, loyal listeners. We're so excited to be back with you on the Social Power Lab, Mr. Doctor Master, Jedi Master, Ted Vokes.
But it's like every week that my lead in is just laughing at what you said to introduce
I
me.
That's how
That
we got to do it.
that's
I don't
it
I'm
is.
not I don't know how to be normal. I apologize. You know,
I wouldn't we
but
wouldn't we
and you
wouldn't love you the way we do if
know,
you. Yeah.
using the L word right in the beginning.
Oh yeah.
How
Oh,
compassionate, and we're going to talk about compassion today and many other things.
we
I'm
are.
Adrian Deschamps, partner of Folks Leadership Group, and yeah, looking forward to recording this week's. We had some really awesome feedback over the last week on our past episodes, so thank you everyone for the feedback that you provided. It means the world.
Yeah. It
It's
does.
literally why we do what we do is because of being able to hear how people's lives become improved from the knowledge and the application of social power and good psychology, right? So
What we're
yeah,
here
thank
to
you,
do.
everyone. Um, yeah, before I start ranting about something random and off topic, what are we feeling, Ted?
We're feeling first. We're feeling that we're missing Amir, but
Yes.
we'll he'll be back as soon as we're able to make all of that happen, and he's well earned rest. So um, we'll sally forth with just the two of the three partners, um, and hopefully you won't get tired of both of our voices because I
Maybe.
I miss Amir, prompting him. Amir, what do you think? Right?
Yeah. What what's in the depth of knowledge in your mind that you're not speaking up about?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
Adrian's still talking. I want
Well,
I
me
want to
too.
find a way to make him a banana and chocolate milk flavored cake. Not chocolate flavored, chocolate milk flavored. Those are
Weird.
like two of his favorite things.
Oh, right. Yeah, they are.
Bananas and
That's
chocolate
true.
milk.
Yeah.
I drink coffee in the morning. He does banana and chocolate milk, and I respect him for it. That is that is a unique, like, whoever heard of a psychologist doing that?
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, psychologists are people too, I suppose. Um, yeah.
maybe.
Maybe. It's up for debate. We'll see. We'll see. Um, yeah. So yeah, we got a full slate today that we're intending to talk about, and we keep promising to bring in listeners' input and feedback and ideas, and we are going to start today with one of those that came out of a wonderful discussion I had with a brilliant uh, 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 PhD from a different field, and so I'll bring that forward because it's a great point that he made in a discussion that we're having, and we have an answer to this great point. What is that great point? Power versus influence. That's the point. And when we do the training, when we're writing the book, we don't really use the word influence, and that's a deliberate choice. But I think it's important that we make it clear why, because we would be using it if we felt it was a useful construct. But we'll come back to that. And then what we're going to do is explore, because picking up on where we left off with the dark tetrad, the five core strategies that those who are on the dark tetrad set of four dark personality traits will deploy because they use power. They use the same 12 forms of power as everybody else. They use them in ways that the rest of us couldn't bring ourselves to do. So, and we were talking about that in previous episodes where everybody on that spectrum of from dark to Goldilocks to dazzling relates to power in very different ways. We actually talked about that last week, I believe. So this is to play to how those on the dark tetrad will orient towards power, and they use 5 core strategies, and then they have a slew of tactics, and we're going to
Yeah.
cover that, right?
And once you learn how to identify these, it's one of those like unfortunate aha moments for a lot of people because they've
Mm-hmm.
seen it a lot of times and they go, "Oh, right." And that's something that yeah, every time, someone receives this training, a lot of the side conversations is about how they've, recognized this happening with someone in their lives for years, right? Using these
Yep.
different strategies and tactics. So, yeah, we're gonna dive into those.
Yeah. So, and just cue me so that we make a distinction between strategy and tactics. That'll help people wrap their heads around it. Um,
Mhm.
so, but I'm going to start with another thing. I think I'm surprising you with this factoid, and
Ooh.
it's more than a factoid. It's not like one of those interesting things. It's actually well. So we've been talking about how current estimates are that about 15% of the population will, you know, fall into some combination of the dark tetrad traits. And so that's, 15 out of 100 people. Um, and that means that they are fundamentally egocentric, they are fundamentally callous about other people, and manipulative. That's the commonality across all 4 traits. And then you get into the nuances of, psychopathy and sadism and Machiavellianism and yeah. Um, what did I leave out? I left out one. God, you'd think I'd know. I did.
Narcissism.
Narcissism. Thank you. The most the most well known. I leave
Yeah,
out.
the most prominent one.
Yeah, that's right. Um, so yeah, here's the punchline. We are still going to look at these numbers, but they're coming from a really reliable source. There are a number of academics out in University of British Columbia, um, and Delroy Paulus is one of the best known dark trait uh, researchers and theorists. And there is another psychologist who I am seeing on social media a great deal, and she's doing some great snippets on the dark traits. And I'm embarrassed to say I did not download or locate her name. So I'll bring that up at another time. I want to give credit fully where it's due. But what it looks like the numbers that UBC is using, since they're kind of a bastion of investigators into the dark tetrad, is that it's probably more like 20% of the population would score high on some various combination of the dark tetrad. So, um, it was important before, and now we're up to 1 in 5, if that's indeed the case. We follow the data, so when we look into it, if it's less but I think it's safe to say it's 15 to 20% of the population. Um, were you aware of that, or had you heard that about that one, Adrian?
No, that's
Yeah.
that's new to me.
Well, okay, so we
Yeah.
had the yeah, we had the privilege of doing a keynote this week with I would say all of the mental health service providers in the Windsor Essex area, and they were very kind to invite us to their connecting our community uh, symposium for mental health and addictions professionals, and they had asked us to talk about. We spent 3 hours talking about the dark traits and how they manifest and what's the pattern underlying the high conflict pattern that we're going to be talking more about as things go on. High conflict is not different from the dark tetrad. The dark traits account for the high conflict pattern of behaviors. So we'll come back to that too. But yeah, if we didn't like it at 15%, there's evidence right now that suggests it might be 20. So, and that kind of accounts for a lot. We'll be reworking our models a little bit to reflect the new data if are convinced that this data is the best. And it's coming from a pretty reliable source, but I'm going to read it first before we make that final pronouncement. Um, but there is a lot of consensus about that 15%, and it wouldn't surprise me if we were going to go to 20.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either. I mean, I don't know. I always go back to think of every, I don't know, class in grade school you've been in. Think of every meeting you've ever went to, or any sports team you've ever been on, or any birthday party you've ever been to, right? There's always, you know, one or two folks, right, in
Yep.
every handful of those social gatherings that you.
Hmm.
So that really wouldn't surprise me. And even just like the different intensities of these traits, like to what degree, right? Because
Hmm.
these traits have degrees, and subtypes, and right
Yep.
there's a lot there, and it just makes me wonder, like, yeah, with recent data, how it's being looked at. But
We'll put it to Amir when we're able to as well, on because he's the one that's the 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 very founder of the dazzling tetrad, and has been bringing forward the dark activated group. So initially, if you think back to previous episodes, it was 15, and then it was 20 that would be dark activated. 15 who are dark, 20% of the population dark activated, and then 30% in the Goldilocks zone, 20% HSP, highly sensitive persons, leading into the last 15%, which is dazzling. So we'll be reevaluating those numbers, or reaffirming them if that's where the data goes. But uh, I could see that maybe fewer of the population are dark activated and more are just dark on this basis, right?
yeah, yeah,
So
activated's so interesting.
it is. It's
It's
a different class in a way,
yeah,
right? You get the same behaviors, but not the same antecedent conditions.
yeah,
Um, they're not motivated to go dark, but they sure will if the culture is dark, or really reinforces that, or makes it necessary
yeah,
for them to survive. Now, not everybody will be dark activated, and Adrian
no,
and I did an initiative a few years ago where I think we mentioned it too. One dark individual comes into a team of about 13. Um, by the time we're brought in, it looks like three high conflict and dark individuals going at it in the workplace. And when we did the historical run into this culture review, the two of the three, the new person was definitely dark. The other two had never been dark in their fairly long tenure with that team,
yeah,
and then they went dark and to as a survival strategy. And other people on the team, there's only the three that really went into the dark power games. Were applying to get out of the team. It was in a unionized environment, and they were bidding to take other jobs outside of the team that involved substantial pay cuts just to get away from it. And those we would garner would be on the Goldilocks, highly sensitive, and possibly dazzling. We didn't do that analysis with those others, but that's the other direction that people will go. They'll either come in, put the blinders on, and just try to ignore it all, which is very hard, and it doesn't work. It takes its toll, and then others will say, "I'm out." So,
yeah. Toxic cultures, right?
yep.
That's where we see these things the most, or
Yeah.
you know, schoolyard friend groups.
Oh, you nail it. Yep.
Like, yeah. So, I guess before we dive in to these five core strategies, can you tell us the difference between strategies and tactics?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I was going to do that piece real quick on why we don't use the term influence.
Okay.
Right. And so um, we considered that we the problem with psychology can be that we use terms that we operationalize. We take a term from life, and then we put sort of scientific parameters around what we mean specifically by that.
Yeah.
And and then sometimes it breaks into the general, lexicon of society, and there's good things and there's problem things about that. Um, but in psychology, we mean very specific things by terminology. Um, and so I could say influence and mean one thing, and you might really think of it as another thing. But if you're talking among psychologists, we're going to try to operationalize our definitions. Um, and so when, earlier in our work on developing this theory, is there a difference between power and influence? Because lots of people talk about that. We were familiar with political science favorite distinction, hard power, soft power. And it has an intuitive appeal. Most people will kind of get what you mean by hard power and soft power. Um, but it's it's not a very refined distinction, right? And in anybody's world. And so, we're talking about 12 forms, and we could actually lump them. We will later on into what people often consider soft or hard power. Um, but it's not helpful, and or it's not helpful enough. But influence versus power, that is kind of loaded. And we really looked at this. So we consider influence not a bad word, but it's not helpful in the context of an analysis of power and a theory that can account for how human beings interact with other human beings to produce or prevent their intended effects. So, you know, uh, what people, I had this great conversation, this other wonderful academic in the social sciences, um, and he's saying, well, what about influence? You're going through these 12 forms and whatnot, but what about influence? Why are not talking about influence? And we had answered that for ourselves and then promptly not told anybody about it. So here's what we can say about that and why we really don't find it useful. I will say, and we did talk about influence in a previous episode where it was just focused on reality shaping power. So usually the marketers, when they're talking about influence or influencing public perceptions, things like that, they're usually meaning what we would consider reality shaping power. And of course, reality shaping power is a composite form, and it can be made up of expert power and information power, blended in a particular interaction with somebody who values those more base forms of power that this person is bringing to the table. But you don't have to be an expert in order to have reality shaping power. If I love you and I care about you, like I do, Adrian, um,
Aw.
and, and you tell me, something about, how you're doing, I'm going to give you attention. We talked about how attention is necessary for power, and I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to say, I want you to shape my reality. You're not having a good day. Tell me about that, right? So it's not just from experts. It can come from, many combinations of the forms of power. Um, but to say forms of power are just influence, that's a problem. And let me try to illustrate this here. Um, let's imagine that it is my intended effect to transfer the entirety of your wealth to me. Okay, I want to gain material power at your expense. And it's quite literally because money is the proxy for all other forms of material power, food, water, shelter, weapons, medicine, all those survival things that we lump into material power. So this is my intended effect. And so if I steal your fortune at the point of a gun, um, or I convince you to invest in a fraudulent business venture, or I use my wily romantic charms and seduce you out of all of your money, um, my intended effect is the same, right? I have, through these three different strategies, these forms of power. So let's break that down. Um, right. So uh, referent power, love and desire, is it could be considered soft power in many respects. But hatred and contempt, which is the negative referent power, often you're not going to consider that soft power. Um, so referent power is involved in this one. That would be me manipulating through seduction. Um, then reality shaping power, the sales pitch, right? Which you could say is soft power. And it is relative to the first example I gave, which was material power, the gun, at the point of gun. Give me all your money, right? Um, and most people will say material power is equates pretty much to hard power. Um, is this making sense so far, Adrian? Because this is the first time he's hearing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm almost done. Now, if we imagine that your fraud is revealed, right, or my fraud, I'm the one trying to get your fortune, is revealed, or the romance is unreciprocated, then one might resort to material power, hard power, by pulling the gun and forcing the person, on pain of death, to give me access to your bank accounts. So all are merely different forms of power deployed to achieve the same intention. And so it's really important to say, if, regardless of how I feel about the form of power that's being used, if it produces the intended effect, or could, maybe not in this case, but in other cases, then it is just a form of power. And, I might like it that you're using charm and charisma on me to swindle me out of my money more than at the point of a gun. But or at least, well, I think it's genuine. I might be liking it, but it's a manipulation there. So if you can produce the same intended effect, whatever it is, via different means, then I don't see a place for influence there. It all is power. It's just they are very different forms of power, and that entail very different strategies to enact them. What do you think about that, Adrian? I want to hear your thoughts.
I think I know how to use charm and seduction on a mirror now. That's probably the
Wow.
first thing I'm gonna. No,
For first thing,
for,
yeah.
first important lesson from that. But yeah, I mean, the way I kind of see it is influence. I don't, for lack of a better word, it's almost when it's used so much, it
Subtly.
explains so
Oh,
many things, right? It
hmm.
almost. I feel like if we were to say influence instead of power attempts, it almost dilutes the impact of it.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Because if I get your fortune, with a gun, or with seduction, or with a sales pitch, it's still the same outcome,
Yeah.
right? I produce my outcome. Then there are three very different approaches. And they could be contradictory too, right? I'm trying to, romance you, and you see through it and you say, you don't actually care about me, you care about my money. And so I say, all right, fine, and I pull out a gun. you know, so I change up my power strategy. That one didn't work. Let's see if this one does, right? And so people can switch up their power strategies. This one's failing. I'll try this one.
Hmm.
So that's why we don't really use influence, because it doesn't fall into some kind of special category. We will be talking about how some power style or power schema that we all have. Some people really like somebody's power schema. Those who elect a particular politician will be, I like the way they use power. I don't like the way that other person uses power. Now, they're not saying this, but that's, their leadership style is really their power schema.
That's what they're drawn towards. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, my Russian friends would talk about how Vladimir Putin was the Russian ideal. Like, we trust that. We don't, we know he's corrupt, but we trust strong leadership. Your politicians would not go over well in Russia. They would be considered weak. So different cultures have different power ideals that they venerate or say. And why is this the case? They explained it to me beautifully by saying, anytime you hear freedom, Ted, you don't hear it the way we hear it. Anytime in Russian history where we had quote unquote freedom, it was chaos. We would rather have somebody who's a strong leader. Yes, they're corrupt. Yes, they're benefiting themselves at the expense of the people. But if they don't totally, you know, um, reap all the benefits out of the nation, people will tolerate it because in exchange, they get order, predictability, structure, stability. And so we don't think of freedom the same way as people who've been through what they have been through. So different leadership ideals.
Mm, that's a great
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. So there you go. And it was a great conversation, and I appreciate his wisdom in raising the question. And so that's why we don't talk about influence, because it's just not particularly helpful. Yeah. Amir did point out that influence used in literature tends to be very much around marketing, and that again goes back to various strategies for reality shaping. So
Hmm.
yeah, um, seldom does a company want to be seen as you buy our product at the point of a gun. They want they want you to be delighted to buy their product. They want to feel, that you're going to feel like I'll be more complete when I have this, brand new KTEL, pocket diaper steamer. My life will be complete then if I just only
Pocket
had that.
diaper steamer.
Yeah, yeah, it's
How do you
absolutely
come
not
up
a
with
thing.
this stuff? Oh, it's real?
I No, no, it's not. It's
Okay, I was gonna say,
yeah.
how on
Oh,
earth?
but I did have like the Popeil Pocket Fisherman as a kid, and it actually worked. It was a short little fishing rod, folded out. You couldn't quite put it in your pocket, but it was like, you know, and I'd go fishing in these streams that were difficult to access in New Brunswick, and you know, and it was the best thing. Everybody else had the long fishing rods, and they get hung up in the trees and the bushes,
Yeah.
and this little thing would actually work. So I don't know why it didn't catch on, but I'm not a career fisher person, so that's all right. um, but I digress. And wh- where? Oh, yes, where we're going next? We're going to strategies, aren't we? Strategies of the Dark Tetrad.
Yeah.
All
But
right.
I guess before we go into strategies, um, we do want to talk to you guys more about, what Vogue's leadership group does in general. And so there's going to be a very soothing voice coming up soon, that lets us, explore that more. So after this break, we'll be right back, diving right into the 5 core strategies. Probably talking about more things like I don't even know what on earth you said, a diaper.
A pocket diaper steamer. Come on, get with the
Pocket
program.
diaper
Yeah,
steamer.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah, but we'll be right back after this break. Stay tuned and keep those thoughts rolling.
This week's spotlight from Volk's Leadership Group is on our learning labs. They are highly interactive, science based training sessions that help your people actually apply what they're learning. From power styles in leadership, to managing high conflict personalities, to culture management techniques, we design labs around real dynamics in your workplace and not just some generic case study. Thank you, and now back to today's episode.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope everyone got their grape juice or orange juice or coffee or whatever we're drinking. Um,
No, they all went to Google pocket diaper steamer.
that's what I did. I mean,
Or put it through AI. I ripped it off from Bloom County. Okay, I can't take credit for coming up with something that absurd. I'm absurd myself, but yeah, um, yeah. The idea, it's just perfect, right?
mhm.
What we'll buy when call before midnight tonight, right? That's an influence strategy.
Yeah,
Call to action and an urgency. Yeah.
I had one work on me this week. It was this like rubber vacuum attachment that you can use to vacuum out the dust in your
I
like
saw that.
beneath your air filter and and their advertising hook is like you can stop an accidental house fire. And I'm like, well, who the hell wants an accidental house fire? My God, I need to buy this. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
No, and we know in advertising, the whole thing is to manufacture need,
yeah,
right? Your
nerd.
life will be more, yeah, your life will be more complete. If you do this. I remember, being a single dad and watching these McDonald's commercials, and they weren't selling the food at McDonald's. It was this, glowy, warm kind of weekend that they set up with a dad taking his two kids to McDonald's, and it was about an experience. They were selling an experience. The food was around them, but it wasn't, look at our burger, oh, it's so fantastic, or look at our breakfast menu, it's so fantastic. It was, they were selling an experience, and I watched it and I knew what was happening. I was like, damn, it's working on me. I want to be that good dad. I'm taking my son to McDonald's. It didn't happen that way exactly, but I
Mm.
saw through the effort to tell me I'll be a better dad if I take my little boy to McDonald's. So
Yeah, I feel like, I would be Grimace, you would be the Hamburglar, and then Amir would probably be Ronald. That's where my brain's going for no good reason.
that's no good reason. No, no. This is, I think this, we acknowledged at the outset, this is our second episode where we're doing it in a sleep deprived state. So
Yeah,
there's no checks and balances this week. So we'll try to focus ourselves. So should we do the core strategies that the high conflict people or and that which is the dark tetrad individuals tend to use? Is
let's
that right?
dive in.
Let's go. So, what's the difference between strategy and a tactic? We're going to identify the five core strategies, which are overarching global kinds of statements about how people will what they're trying to achieve. I have a strategy, and then you have the tactics via which you achieve that strategy. And so there are many more tactics that the people with dark traits will deploy in order to get their way, produce their or prevent their intended effect. And so we'll get into the tactics next time, but there's five core strategies that are the overarching way. In the military, they'll say that the generals will say, our objective is to, take this amount of land in the next 2 months, and then they push that objective down. That's this, and what are we going to do? We're going to, dig in, or we're going to, attack over, this terrain and things like that. But the commanders on the ground get the strategy, and then they typically have to develop the tactics to achieve that strategy. So big picture strategy, micro level, moment to moment, that's tactics. And when we do this training, it makes a lot of sense to people that there's some strategies that subsume the various tactics they use. How did I do it on that, Adrian?
It was beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
I, you know, it's almost like the first time I heard "Arms Wide Open" by Creed.
Oh my God. I could just go down, I could totally go down that rabbit hole right now. Oh my God.
Before we do,
Oh God, yes. Um, yeah. All right. I'll fight off the urge to go down the Creed rabbit
be
hole
the
right
model I
now.
have to be. Okay, I'm done. So our first strategy.
First, so the first strategy that they use, and this is no particular order, um, but these are the things they're doing. They're going to work hard to increase their power and simultaneously, wherever possible, undermine the power of others. And this is kind of brilliant, so you go out there and you decide to get a qualification in your life. I now have a certificate that I am qualified in, alternative dispute resolution, or I have a certificate that I'm qualified to, work, this is some kind of, advanced CNC machine or something like that. That's increasing your expert power by, going off and getting a legitimate kind of credential. And you may do it, just by learning it. Maybe you don't need a formal credential for those kinds of things. You just learn it. You're still increasing your information power, your knowledge, and your expert power. Um, And so that's the one side. Work hard to increase your power. And those are legitimate ways of increasing your power. There's nothing wrong with that. But what they will do is work hard to increase their power. And usually they're trying to steal it from somebody else. And they want to undermine the power of others. And then they will do them separately. I'll work hard at increasing my power and at the same time, try to undermine you in the eyes of other people to maybe convince them that you really don't know what you're doing. So I'm trying to diminish your expert power and try to increase mine. So they are big on it, and they will do these things by playing dirty. And they'll even take great pride in themselves for doing things that really other people look at and say that that's backstabbing. And we have lots of language for expressing all of these things. What would you add there, Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, one example that comes off the top of my head is when I was actually getting my degree, right? So, you know, young dapper lad enrolled in university, and I remember somebody was trying to essentially overpower me, right? And
Mm,
they said, "Well, yeah, you might be in university, but you're doing the easiest program there." My program, however, is a real university program because we do X, Y, and Z with cherries on top and raspberry sauce and whatever, right? And the intention there, the power attempt was to essentially, knock me down a few notches, right?
yeah,
It was a reality
diminish.
power attempt. It was an expert power attempt. It was an exclusion power attempt, right? All of these different things put into one, trying to make me feel like I'm not a true, like, I guess this person really felt like a scholar, but trying
Yeah.
to make me feel excluded from other,
Hmm.
people who have degrees, trying to shape my reality that, I wasn't in a prestigious enough program, and then him also talking like he was the expert on what university programs are, I don't know, difficult.
Valuable or not valuable, right? Yeah.
um, but yeah, like, and it's things like that, right? It's things where you know you're trying to be, or the person is trying to diminish you, while they're also trying to empower themselves, right?
Yeah.
And this is something that you see a lot with grandiose narcissists. This is something that's like very telling with that dark trait specifically, because that dark trait requires a lot of the dominance and attention in a conversation, right? So
Well
if
put.
you're in a group of people and there's somebody there that's displaying traits of grandiose narcissism, they're really trying to dominate that conversation and really trying to be the centerpiece of it, right?
Which is power,
Which is
right?
power. Absolutely.
And if they can have all the attention in the room, it doesn't automatically translate into power, but it gives you a platform to exercise it, right?
Yeah.
Because the person who's not getting any attention, who's sitting in the corner, you know, pretending to look at their phone, but is feeling excluded and not valued and has no attention, does not feel powerful, and is not shaping the group dynamic at all.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
yeah,
mean, you even see it in advertising, right? Like, with paper towels or like things like that, right? Where it shows the one paper towel absorbing the liquid perfectly off the counter, but then it shows the other brand is like, leaving liquid there, and they're trying to show how good they are compared to how bad the other
the
is,
other, yeah.
right?
And it's not only done by high conflict and dark traded persons. This is what happens in a courtroom. A lawyer is trying to increase the reality shaping power of their side and to diminish the reality shaping power of the other side. So it's not that this strategy itself is inherently um, malevolent in and of itself. I mean, yes, lawyers are trying to win court cases and whatnot. But it's in a structured environment where there are rules about. I mean, the judge can say you can't enter that evidence, that you cannot use that data or that story or whatever it is to support your claim here. It's inadmissible, right? Um, and so there are times where we are working to increase our power and undermine the power of others. it would not look good on you to go into an interview and say, I'm here and this is why you should hire me. And by the way, I know that, Wasim has put his name in for this position too. And let me tell you why he really is not the right person to do this, right? That probably not win you the job because in that context, you're allowed to sing your own praises, but you're really not allowed to trash talk, other people. That would be, if we saw that in one of the interviews that we do, we would not be impressed by the social intelligence, the lack of social intelligence somebody, might be doing. Um, so is that,
Yeah. And the thing with some of these strategies too is, and I had this conversation with folks that have seen trading on the dark tetrad recently, and it's really funny because they'll hear something and they'll be like, oh well, sometimes I do that. Does that
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I just want to emphasize off the bat that you know dark these I'm laughing because it's I have this conversation so much. Like
yeah,
there's gonna be times in our life where we use power attempts for things, or we people with dark personality traits, they're doing these power attempts like with malice and consistently
yeah,
in lots of situations, right? If you're, I don't know, if you're doing an exercise in a classroom to get votes for a mock presidency, right? You might use this type of strategy, right? It doesn't mean that
right.
you're you have dark traits, right? And my towel example with the paper towels, like that wasn't a dark trait strategy, right? That's just. But the point is that people with these high conflict traits, these are the things that they usually do. Is they take these certain behaviors and then they exercise them to meet their needs, which are usually, you know, based in malice or self-serving, or and they
Right.
have no problem using these behaviors to exploit others, right?
Cynical disregard for
Yeah.
the well-being of anybody else. Yeah. Yeah, so we always emphasize that, and we will re-emphasize that when we talk about the tactics. Everybody can do some of these some of the time. These individuals, and let's say I'm not at my best and I engage in one of these tactics, I will probably feel really crappy about myself, and hopefully I will make an apology. I'll say, man, Adrian, I'm so sorry. That's, I don't like how I, behave towards you, right? And so an apology comes. These individuals, with the dark traits, they're ready to play dirty, and there's no guilt, there's no remorse. In fact, there can be delight that I swindled you out of your fortune. Um, you
It
know,
feels gratifying. It
it,
feels
it does. I'm
like you,
powerful.
yeah, like the person feels better about themselves for accomplishing it.
Yeah, and by the way, you deserve it
Yeah.
for being weak, right? If I can exploit you, you're weak, and I'm doing you a favor by teaching you how the world really works. So
Ooh, great example here. If I can exploit you, you're weak, but I'm also extremely intelligent,
yes,
right? So it'll like that narrative will go. Oh, yeah, it gets.
just floods their reward center of their brain.
Yeah.
Look at that. Yeah. So yeah, there's strategy number one. And the again, I said no particular order, but um, weaponizing your compassion, right? And this is, where they say, hey, can you do me a solid? Can you help me out, right? Can you do me this favor one time, or look the other way? Don't write me up, boss. All right, I know I'm 15 minutes late, but next time I'll do you a solid. I'll stay later, or when you need somebody, I'll step right up and I'll do that. So now they're using exchange power from a subordinate position of power. You can write me up. I'm going to try and get you not to write me up by using some referent power. Hey, be a good guy. Be a stand-up kind of person. There's all kinds of terminology that will get used. And then if they're dark, I guarantee you, they are not going to reciprocate when you want it or need it, right? They may even leverage that over you. Well, you didn't write me up last time, so if you write me up this time, I'm going and I'm telling management that you know, um, so now I've got you trapped, by virtue of your past behavior. I'm using it against you as opposed to, oh yeah, I'll be there for you, man. You know. Um, and again, it goes back to they see people with no darkness as their primary targets, their favorite targets, and you're an easy mark, you're a dupe, you're a patsy, and they'll look down their nose at you, and even go far as to say, hey, you should be grateful to me. I'm teaching you an important life lesson. Weak people finish last. Nice guys finish last. This kind of stuff.
Hmm. Or one of my favorites I've seen was somebody say like, I consider you to be a really compassionate person, so I'm hoping that you'll understand this.
Right. Yeah.
They'll, you know, tr- lay something on you, and then when you don't understand, then it becomes like, well, are you really as compassionate as you say you are? Like it's that kind of stuff,
You
right?
just said I was compassionate, right? So you're laying on me and hoping to activate an organization of self, a version of me that is going to be primed to be compassionate, and then you're going to exploit it. And
Yeah.
then if I see through it, you're going to go, well, I thought you cared about people, right? I thought, but clearly you don't, which we're getting into a tactic now, which we'll talk about later. But
Oh, yes.
yeah, yeah, it's definitely a tactic. So. So yeah, they see compassion as weakness, and one of the key things here is that people with dark traits don't frame the world in terms of good people and bad people, and give that up if you're thinking about somebody or have identified somebody with one or more of the dark tetrad. They see the world in terms of winners and losers, and winners deserve the spoils of being winners and at the expense of the losers. So it's a very different framing of reality, of social reality, to look at it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, compassion's interesting.
There's a push right now in some circles to say compassion is the weakness of humanity, and
Yeah,
we've got to eradicate it, right? Um, there's but yeah, we could have a lot to say on that one. We'll come back to that some other time. But yeah, it's a cynical look at you know, um, and the assumption basically is everybody's in it for themselves, um, right? And if you're not, you're stupid, right? That's the perspective that's taken.
yep. There's no
Yeah.
true altruism.
Yes. Yeah. And by the way, we got to do an episode on that because the evidence absolutely contradicts that assertion that there is no, even people that save somebody's life, they do it so that they can be a hero and it's gratifying to them. And, this is one of those, it's sort of a cynical view on altruism that did take hold for some time. There are no truly altruistic acts. And, well, unfortunately for those who want to believe that, there's enormous amount of evidence to the contrary, and that uh, not every human being is capable of selfless acts, but so many people are, and will do so. So yeah, I think that's a whole episode. Um, but yes, weaponizing of compassion is, and well-intentioned people will want to be compassionate. They'll go, well, yeah, I understand why they're late this time, and I've been late myself too. I'll do them a favor this time, and then suddenly, well, you didn't write me up last week. What's changed now? I'm taking this, up the chain. I'm going to take this to human resources, or I'm going to take it to the union, or what have you, to say you're not applying the rules consistently, and I'm going to get you in trouble for being compassionate and nice to me, right? So there's the weaponization.
And then we got number
Lovely
three.
stuff. Number three, I think this is everybody's one to love to hate the most.
Oh yeah.
Um, we don't have a fancy psychological name for this. this strategy. So we just call it kiss up and kick down. And this is so prevalent with people with dark traits. And let's start with the you're on a date, and you're this new person who you're dating, and obviously you have find some degree of attraction to, is really charming and wonderful to you, and they're considerate, and they're complimentary, and you're thinking, wow, this is just a really fine person. Then the server comes along and puts the wrong plate down or something like that in front of this person, and they take great offense. What's this? Well, this is not what I ordered. Well, this is I ordered XXX, right? And decenters that person who's just trying to serve the meal. All it would take would be, oh, I'm very sorry, this is for another table or whatever that was, and then so that person, has been, very cruel to the server. That's kiss up and kick down, and the advice on that one is don't pay attention to how they're treating you right now. Pay attention to how they just behave towards somebody who has less power than they do. And they could even, well, this is how they learn. They have to learn that, there's standards in restaurants, and if you can't cut it, you shouldn't be in the business. They'll have all kinds of rationales so that, then they'll go back to being charming to you. That is huge red flag. Go ahead, Adrian. I can see you want to pop in on that one.
I was in a restaurant. I forget what. Well, I guess it doesn't matter what restaurant, but I was in a restaurant and I saw people. I'm assuming it was a first date or maybe a series of firsts, and yeah, the man basically told off the server because the server wasn't refilling his water enough, and then
Mm.
you saw the girl he was with looked very uncomfortable, and then you saw him continue to explain to the girl after, like, yeah, you see, in true service and like true good establishments, you should never go more than 5 minutes without your water refilled if it's empty. They should notice that right away and come and do it. Like, it just like, and then kind of like giving her this speech on how things should be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was just, that's one of the problems with psychology is just like you kind of notice everything in an environment.
Hmm.
I was just trying to have some pancakes or something. So
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. So that's kiss up, kick down happens in all kinds of contexts. So, the minute your boss's boss walks into the office, and your boss is like, "Oh, so good to see you, Mr. So and so, or Ms. So and so," and is doing this flagrant kissing up. And the minute that boss leaves, thinking that everything is great on this team, the boss turns and says, what are you all looking at? Get back to work, right? Um, and so we have seen this so often where, let's say, a board of directors or a senior leadership team or people who have power have never seen this from a person that they interface with, at the executive team level, and it can happen on every level. There will be kids in the classroom who know how to look good to the teacher, and when the teacher isn't looking, will shake you down for your lunch money. So, and it tends to start early in many of these cases too. So, we have seen it where people are absolutely unable to see what is being reported to them. They'll even, I cannot fathom that she would ever behave this way to other human beings. I've never seen that. And what we're doing is encouraging people to at least stay open to the possibility that you've only seen the kiss up side of somebody,
yeah,
and that there is very much that possibility of kicking down. Yeah. So, but it can be hard because we trust our perceptions, and our experience of somebody.
yeah, and that's why we often say, with understanding this psychology, is you want to look at things in different contexts, right? Different
Hmm.
contexts, different organizations of self, different, you know, social situations, right? Because that's where you start to find, you know, these patterns.
Yeah. And, and I mean, I remember being in the classroom and being mindful that the teacher was there and being on my best behavior, but I wasn't kicking down either. Maybe I was, the drawing pictures instead of doing my math homework, right? And so I'm not kicking down. I'm trying to get away with something. And when the teacher looks, I quickly flip to my math homework and make it look like people do this, but it's not dark. It may be, not what the teacher wants you to be doing, but yeah, that's that's not the same thing. And there's a big punchline to this one, but you look like you're going to lean in on this one.
No, no. What's the
Okay.
punchline you were
The
brewing?
punchline that I didn't realize until I think it was you or Amir said it. If they can kiss up in one context and kick down in another, then you can never let them get off with but I didn't know better, right? Because they do know. They know what they're doing. They know what they're doing when they're kissing up. They know what they're doing when they're kicking down. These are deliberate choices. They size up the situation. Do I have more power than these individuals? I'm going to kick down because it's gratifying, right? To their brains. Their brains are wired to find the abuse of other people to be gratifying, to set off the reward system of the brain. Um, and we've seen this in the workplace. People say, well, how am I supposed to know how to interact with somebody from a different culture? I mean, I was just, born into this one, so send me for sensitivity training, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, well, but if in all other contexts you were behaving appropriately in meetings and it's only with, when somebody from a different ethnic group is in the room, you know what you're doing. It's not that you don't have the skill set. It's that you're denying this. So yeah, don't fall for that. Oh, I just didn't know better kind of attitude. They know
Mhm.
exactly what they're doing, and they've been doing it a long time. Yeah, that cover that one.
That does. Yeah.
Okay. All right, number four. Yeah, this is one that we really realized more recently. Um, uh, flooding the zone and double standards. So what people with dark traits will frequently do is use superordinate power strategies to flood the zone. Other phrases for it would be shock and awe. So much power coming at you at one time that you don't even know what to respond to. Blitzkrieg, for those of you who are history, nerds, lightning warfare, right? You concentrate all your forces in one place in the line and then burst through, and while the your opponent is um, destabilized and trying to make sense of what just happened, you win the day. And it doesn't have to be done with material power. You can flood the zone, you know, a, a, uh, a lawyer could pepper a witness on the stand with questions so that they can't even sort of keep up. And hopefully the judge would say, "Hey, that's not an appropriate tactic here." But um, that would be an example. Throwing at you all of the times you've screwed up in your life, and just overwhelming your brain with you know guilt and shame. It could be a tactic as well. And people with dark traits will often catalog all of your errors and mistakes over time, and pull them out and use them to remind you just how incompetent you are, how incapable you are, that sort of thing. So it's I think the word that best describes it for me is flooding the zone. You got a fire hose of power attempts coming at you, and you can't even fend them off, right? Um, and then there'll be this double standard that they apply because you know the one of the hallmarks of narcissism is that the rules don't apply to me, but they apply to you.
Yeah.
And so there's where the double standard comes in. Um, and so, yeah, it's, and if you push back, then they will make you out to be the bully.
Hmm.
It's not them, right? So that's flooding the zone and the double standards. And they really believe it. No, the rules don't apply to me. They may not say it that way, but they definitely apply to you. So,
Yeah. I was so sensitive to that when I was a kid with like other kids on the playground when like they would, I don't know, they'd steal the ball away from me, right? And it was
yeah.
okay and it was funny. And then I'd steal the ball back. And then they'd be like, "How dare you? What are you doing?" Right? Go get a
Oh,
teacher or
wow.
something like that. I remember like just being really young and really early on
Yeah.
recognizing that dynamic and being like, "That doesn't make sense."
We can steal the ball. You can't.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, I just and that one I find especially, yeah,
Yeah.
especially this strategy I find just me personally irks me the most.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, absolutely. And, and we see it on the international stage. You see us talk about schoolyards, but where, a larger power has more leverage to exert, and they absolutely do it. And if a medium or lesser power, tries to push back, it's, oh, you can't do that, right? We can do that, but you've got to be punished for asserting yourself. We can assert ourselves with impunity, but you assert yourself. You try to stand in your power. That's got to be punished. So, and that leads to the whole thing about might makes right, and might makes right is very much a dark uh, a term or an idea that is frequently utilized by people with dark traits. So yeah, that's the flood in the zone and the double standards for sure. So yeah, I can flood the zone, you can't, right? Um, so we
Yeah,
good.
speaking of a flooded zone, I had a pipe or a valve blow off the pipe under my house last night.
Yeah, yeah, I
That
heard
zone was
you mentioned.
flooded, but it wasn't this type of situation.
Yeah, but if you were flooding, if anybody's been flooded, I've had a couple basement floods, and you can't keep up, right? You just feel out of control.
Hmm.
It's an awful experience, and you're not. It's not somebody doing it. Last time it happened to us, it was there was a tornado that there's three tornadoes that touched down in the area, and so um, with all the associated rain, um, so you really feel like you're fighting for your basement and everything that's in it. Um,
Yeah.
so,
And with this strategy, I find you feel like you're fighting for logic.
oh yeah,
Like
yeah, good point.
it's like, wait, how come you can do that and I can't? Like, why is it okay if you know, or like, or even just like the frustration towards like if somebody criticizes you about something and then, well, you've done that to me 3 times now, so why is it okay for you, right? Yeah, it's these strategies are pretty and again like I'm pretty convinced that everyone listening is gonna like think of examples of these strategies, and we're at the perfect timing to go to our last one because we're just
Yep.
over 1 hour mark. So
All right, let's get her
yeah,
in.
we're it's like we do this every week.
We do it. Oh yes, no, that's your point.
That
All
was
right. Yeah, we're tired. Okay, we're tired, but we're happy. We're happy doing this
happy and tired.
with everybody. Yeah. Um, so this one, eh, sometimes the most obvious things are the things that don't get said, right? They're so much a part of our consciousness that we don't think to say them. And that's another interesting piece of psychology, by the way. It definitely relates to power, but it's not necessarily directly about power. Um, and so this one is the predictable ruthlessness and relentlessness that these individuals will deploy. Um, One of the things that has been pointed out in the literature is that these individuals will typically not be at all self-reflexive. They won't be looking at their motives, their drivers. They will only respond to what they want and will try to take it. But they won't, after that meeting or that, you know, Friday night when everybody went out and they made somebody in the group or people in the group feel diminished and whatnot. They won't walk away from that going, wow, maybe I was out of line, or maybe I need to call Adrian and apologize to him. That's not what they do. Now, those who are in the Goldilocks zone and definitely the highly sensitive people and the dazzling, they will, and almost to a fault when you get into the dazzling, because it's like you have an interaction with somebody and you walk away and you go, oh my God, I wonder if when I told Adrian that I really liked his sweater, that he thinks that every other time I see him, I don't like how he dresses and now he hates me and oh my God, right? So, and you call him and say, Adrian, I'm so sorry about. And Adrian's like, what? What are you talking about? Like, you like my sweater? I told you where you can get one, right? So you go to the other way, and there can be problems there too. But I digress. Those are the dark traits will be ruthless in what they'll do. They will not harbor the shame or guilt that comes with it. Narcissists can, under certain restricted conditions, feel some guilt sometimes for some people. It would have to be somebody they see as superior or on par with them, right? Because they're not going to have empathy for people that are beneath them. Psychopaths, they don't have any capacity for shame and guilt. So, um, but the narcissists come in with a lack of empathy for sure. So to be ruthless in the way you deploy power and then add in relentless, because you could be ruthless in fits and starts. Oh, she's in a mood or he's in a mood, and everyone get clear, but most of the time they're okay. But the truly dark individuals will keep at it. And in fact, if they're treating you well, it's only a manipulation strategy for something else they're going to pull on you. You're useful to them by them treating you well. There's the kiss up, kick down kind of situation, right? So they're relentless. And we see this happen. Adrian and Amir and I have seen this so often where you know, amazing leaders, people that were courageous enough to step into the role of leader. And we'll do another episode on that one coming up, why leadership is one of the toughest things your brain can be tasked to do, even if it's not in a context of high conflict or dark traits. But they got into it. They wanted to lead people ethically, responsibly, and they've been up against somebody else in the organization who has got a lot of power and is undermining their power, doing everything they can to grind them down. And indeed, we had, a senior leader take early retirement and say, I'm bringing you guys in. I heard about what you do on this dark stuff. I wish I knew about it 10 years ago. And of course, nobody really knew much about it 10 years ago, and it hadn't been put together the way, Adrian and Amir have put all this together, all the research findings into this framework to understand these dynamics. But he said, but I'm out. I'm taking early retirement. I wanted to do 3 more years. I I just don't have it in me. I'm ground down. And so I'm bringing you in with this is a point which they had found his successor, and he was staying on to shepherd this new person in. And part of that was bringing us in to help them understand a packet within the organization of high conflict, dark trait individuals. Um, and but he had nothing left other than to say, "This is how I want to leave. I don't want to leave. You a babe in the woods against what you're going to be walking into." Yeah.
Mhm.
So we see that. That's the relentless thing. They don't let it go. They keep at it. They keep at it.
Yeah, and it just festers, right? Like,
Hmm.
and oftentimes we're on the outside looking at like, how do you want to keep that going?
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
but we know how.
I mean, we know how, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But the average person, will look and just be like, wow, like it looks like it takes so much energy,
yeah.
right?
And where they're saving the energy is they're not reflecting. They're not being
Yeah.
self-reflexive, right? If anybody wants to see a really interesting pro-social psychopath, James Fallon, Dr. James Fallon, not Jamie Fallon, the talk show guy. He just recently passed away, and he studied the brains of serial killers and found out, when everybody sort of knew anyway, that he was a psychopath, but he is not a dangerous one in that sense. And most psychopaths are not going to commit crimes, but they're going to get away with everything they can. They're going to exploit you to the ends of the earth. There's no, so he would say, you can see him talk. He's very engaging and funny because he likes to talk about his own, personality dynamic, being a psychopath, but being pro-social. Um, and, you know, so, yeah, look him up. It's really fascinating to see because he talks about it very candidly, and he's very, very charming, and whatnot. And he'll say, "Yeah, no, I don't feel what other people feel." And so he, at one point, describes how he tried to be considerate. He said, "I can psych out psychopathy." And so he's married, had a couple kids who were at the time, in their teens or something like that. And he said, okay, well, I'm going to be considerate. I'm going to think hard about what a considerate person would do. So, what's that look like? Well, instead of uh, picking up the wine bottle and pouring myself a glass of wine, I'm going to pick it up and offer to pour it for my wife. And okay, I can do this. And, so he would engage in this, he'd be drawing from knowledge of how to be a, respectful and considerate person. But it wasn't coming from a motivation to be that. And after about 6 months of this, he found that he was sleeping a lot longer at night. He was exhausted because it was taking so much energy to think about how to be considerate. And then he describes in his story how he tells his wife eventually, honey, I don't know if he called her honey. I don't remember that. But, have you noticed a difference in me? And she said, oh, yeah, absolutely. You're much more considerate and whatnot. And he said, well, I'm faking it, right? And she said, oh, yeah, I do, but keep doing it. Okay. Now, I don't know if he did in the long run, but he was exhausted because he was having to think this stuff through. And most of us will debrief in our head about our day at work, or how did that family gathering go, or how was I on the team today? Was I hogging the puck, or was I passing it in the way we all want to be doing it on our team? Maybe I need to rethink how long I'm holding on to that puck, and get it passed away to other people. And maybe I need to say I'm sorry. I should have passed when I didn't. What are you saying, Ted? I was open. I'm talking like I know how to play hockey. But anyway, yeah, so that's the predictable ruthlessness and relentlessness. And they really, really can grind you down. You can lead to just states of disassociation, um, being overwhelmed just by how relentless these individuals will be. And I'm sure somebody in the literature is saying about relentlessness, but we see it. Um, you know, they don't let up; they keep going, and that seems to be the reason why. So yeah,
Absolutely. Well,
so that's the big picture
that's
on their 5 strategies.
hmm
And we stopped counting techniques because every now and then we add another one, and we'd have to keep updating that. But we're going to walk you through tactics. Sorry, not technique.
yeah.
They're techniques. We did, in quite organically, we did cover off on a fair bit of gaslighting last time. That is what we would consider a tactic to get you to question your own sense of reality. And there's 10 different ways so far that we've identified. There may be more. So we'll break them down. It's not the only tactic they deploy at all. But yeah, on that relentlessness thing, I will often tell the story of the funeral I went to for a client who had passed away, who we worked with for many years, and somebody showed up during the visitation and started to trash talk the man in the casket in front of his family and all of his, friends, associates, business associates, and employees, and made a huge deal of this, how awful a leader he was and no vision, and he called himself a visionary, and he's, look at him now, and this kind of nonsense. And the funeral home people had to essentially say, we're taking you out to the parking lot now, or we're calling the police. And and eventually he you know he but he made his point. And then we find out afterwards that the man who had passed away had terminated this individual 15 years before, right? So not been in the company in 15 years. But I'm gonna, oh look, there's an obit. I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna get my revenge, you know. And so that's the relentlessness of these individuals. That will feed into some of their specific tactics. Well, you know, stay tuned for Targets of Blame. That's
Yeah,
coming next week.
next week. So speaking of next week, is there any closing points you want to add before we take off to space and solve the problems on Mars? Or
Oh, are we doing that? Oh, okay. Yeah. So our next podcast will be from like one of the moons on Mars, will it be? Um, yeah, or just
we'll
Mars
be
itself.
sitting there with the rover.
Yeah. Yeah, well, power is going to work the same way in outer space. As long as you got two human brains interacting, there's going to be power dynamics, and they could be absolutely collaborative and wonderful, and mutually beneficial, because that's how most power is exercised much of the time. Depends on the culture you're in. I don't mean broad culture. I mean like team culture, family culture, but it can be broad as well. Culture works like power does, because culture is the manifestation of patterns of how power is used in that particular group, team, nation state, what have you. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thanks again for joining us tonight, and yeah, going through these 5 strategies with us. And we're gonna dig in more and more. There's just always more to come. So please stay tuned, and like, follow, subscribe,
Yep.
press the plus button on Spotify and your favorite platform. We'll be here, and we're gonna keep on going. So yeah, this is Vokes Leadership Group signing off. We're always standing by, and thank you for joining us for this episode of the Social Power Lab. And we'll see you next time.
Next time. Looking forward to it.
Thank you for listening to the Social Power Lab podcast. Make sure you join us next week as we continue to uncover the hidden dynamics of social power all around us, because every conversation changes the world one interaction at a time. You can listen to the Social Power Lab podcast on YouTube under Social Power Lab _VLG, on Spotify under Social Power Lab, on Substack under Social Power Lab, and on Apple Podcast under Social Power Lab. Thank you and have a wonderful day. This podcast was produced by Trenton Vokes. The theme was produced and written by Adrian Deschamps.